Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works. Today we are back on Gian's 180. We've got a pile of parts over here. We have a bit of a variety of tasks today. Straight up, we got some gas struts, nice and simple little install. Then moving on to our exhausts, we've got some 90-degree bends and a flex joint to do our screamer plumb back, so it's all spot on and legal. Then we're going to finish up with a braided clutch line and a new slave cylinder. This wasn't actually on the cards until we tried driving it the other day, and it actually spilled all the clutch fluid out of it. So yeah, there's obviously something funky going on there. But rather than just replacing the rubber line for a like-for-like braided line, we've gone with this aftermarket one. It actually removes a lot of the complications that the Nissan factory system has. I don't really understand why it's currently the way it is, but these are pretty simple. I've used this pretty much the same line on the Stagia and on a couple of other cars before, and it works really well for what it is. So, I mean, it's a pretty basic braided line, but it does get rid of a lot of the other weirdness. For those not familiar with the S13 setup, we'll pull it out and we'll actually put it on the bench and side to side it with this once we get it out. But enough chit chat. I'm gonna start with these bonnet struts, and then after that's done, we'll get welding. So much terrible translation going on here. I've done these gas struts before on other cars and I've never actually greased it, and then every time, about 9 months later, you go and undo these and they're full of rust and crud. So yeah, this time I've made sure to actually grease this. And interestingly, this kit, which is the first one I've actually seen, it comes with a tiny little thimble of grease and a cotton swab to put in there. I mean, if it didn't come with that, you can use any form of grease at all. Is gonna do it a world of good compared to doing it dry. I would probably use either a nickel or a copper anti-seize, just because it's probably pretty good for that type of gear. But yeah, any grease or even a thick oil, like a little wiper gearbox oil, would probably get you out of trouble if you had nothing else. But yeah, I would probably recommend the grease. But we're going to throw these on. It's very simple. I think we're almost done. I'll be interested to see if this clears the guard. The thing I'm worried about at the moment is clearance in this area. So we'll whack it on and see how far out we are. Sweet deal, it's going to make the bonnet open higher. I hate these clips. They're so fussy. And you can guarantee you're always going to lose one. If you do lose these clips, little RC car body clips also work pretty well. Ask me how I know. This one sucks. The clip's on the bottom side. No more bonnet stick. So much room for activities. I'm going to test this before we put the last clips in, because I'm still not sold that these are actually going to clear the guards. Wow, there's a lot of tension on that. Look at that, it fits. All my fear for nothing. Be gone. We've got our hood damper or gas strut or bonnet strut kit, depending on where you are in the world. It's all on there and working pretty sweet. I didn't originally put the star washers in because sometimes it sort of sits this plate too high, but on this particular setup, it actually stops this plate turning. So yeah, check up on your particular install. I thought the edge of the bonnet would stop it, but it hasn't. So I've just pulled it apart quickly and put the star washers back in. But other than that, I'm a bit of a fan of these for a couple of reasons. They give you more room when you're working in front of the car. I know it sounds simple, but having that stick in the way is actually quite annoying on some stuff. And also, these lift the bonnet up a little bit higher than the factory position. So you get a little bit more access, especially in this kind of area if you're working right in there or working from the front. So it's yeah, a bit of a multi-edged bonus on this one. So works pretty neat. They don't touch the guards like I was worried about. Goes down nicely. And everyone's winning. So we'll move on to the screamer. Or we may do the clutch line first because I'm waiting on hole saws. There's our problem. Of course it's missing the bucket by just that much. How's it still missing the bucket? Ah, it's on my face. In before that's what she said comment in the comments. We've now got our two clutch systems side by side. Obviously at first glance it's heaps more simplified now that we've just gone with the braided line. One thing that is worth mentioning though is putting components side by side. So we've got our old slave cylinder here and our new one here. I noticed pulling it out of the box that the bleed nipple was in the wrong spot. Luckily the ports are actually the same on this particular slave cylinder. So we just swapped the pressure line and the bleed port around. If you don't do that, potentially that's going to mean that your bleed port is lower than your supply line, which will then stop you from bleeding it correctly. So you'll always have air in the slave cylinder. But by moving it around, it puts it at the highest point, so that's nice and simple. One thing I have noticed as well is they give you this banjo fitting. I can only imagine that goes in straight into the side of the master cylinder. So we're going to put this in the master cylinder side first, and then we'll run the line down and mount our slave up and start bleeding it all up, and then that's going to be the real fun part. Ah, bit me. Got our braided line run, and we've now got our slave bolted up. We've tightened our line on both the slave side and the master cylinder side. What I have done is crack the bleed nipple while we're under here. I'm going to bring it down, then we're going to fill it up with brake fluid, and just going to let this thing gravity bleed for a while before we start pressure bleeding it. So it should get most of the air out by gravity bleeding alone, and then we'll just come and finish it off with doing a bit of a pressure bleed. We've done our gravity bleed, everything's looking pretty good. The fluid's coming out pretty fast through the slave cylinder with no air in it. So now it's time for Gian to jump in the car and get out some leg day. Just hold it down on 10. While we're waiting for our hole saws to turn up, I thought I'd have a quick look at the front brakes. Gian did mention that the car does or has pulled to the right, I think, to the right slightly while braking. So we're just going to whip the pads out and check everything out. Clean these slide pins, and I think we might actually just put some new pads in it. These things look like they were off the Ark and then put on the Titanic and then recovered from the Titanic and then still managed to find their way onto this car. So we'll pull them out and throw them in the bin. Yeah, you can see they've been binding on that. See the pads aren't actually sliding on those pins. We'll clean the pins up and we'll put new pads in it and call it done. Some of you guys may be wondering why we're actually lubricating the edge of the pad. Because these are 4-pot calipers, they don't have a slide or anything like that, so the pad's actually doing a lot of sliding work in the body of the caliper. For the same reason we're lubricating the pins that the pads slide on. You've got to be super careful when you're putting lubricant, obviously in braking components, and we're only using it very sparingly. So if you have a quick look, it's only a really fine film. That's plenty for what we need, and same on the pins. You just got to be really careful that you don't overload it. We're using a copper-based anti-seize. This sort of material comes with a lot of genuine brake pads if you buy them from like a OE manufacturer. Aftermarket guys don't really supply it. Bendix do supply a similar grease, or I can't remember if it comes with the pads or you can buy it separately, but it's a very similar type of material. So we've already got it in bulk, so just use it as required, and then it goes in there nice and neatly. Same thing also, remember We were speaking before about these guide pins. You got to clean them up. These ones you can see where the pads have been binding on them because they haven't been cleaned. So give them a really good wire wheel to clean them up, and then they'll go for a while and they'll stop pads binding up as well. So we'll give these ones a buff on the wire wheel, and then we'll throw them back in. Ah, my floor. It's exhausting work. Spot on. What would a leopard's favourite tool band be? Spot on. Not bad for a hammer and a hole saw. We've gotten heaps of stuff done today on Gian's 180. The clutch now works. We've got good front brake pads in it. We've got our external screamer no longer externaling, so it's a lot closer to the roadworthy. So pretty happy with how this is panning out. Super excited to actually see it back on the road. It holds a special place in my heart because it's the first car we actually did, or the first video we actually did. Yeah, so stoked to see it getting closer day by day. Shout out to all our Patreons. Thanks for supporting us. Anyone who's not a Patreon, we've actually added a few more new tiers to that setup. We're also providing a lot more content for you guys. We're doing a blooper reel and all sorts of stuff. Fail. See ya. That'll do. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.